It just gives us a couple of different ways of dealing with, if we want to go to a press and we get beat, we have a second line, and then of course a third line becomes about when the fullback takes over and takes that responsibility. Bolton against Oxford, the League One playoff final at Wembley to decide who goes up to the Championship. I arrived back at the club in mid-November, taking over from Liam Manning. The team had got off to a very good start. The club harboured ambitions to be a Championship club in the next couple of years. So to arrive back and to lead the team out at Wembley on that day against a very good Bolton side was a very special moment. One change from the semi-final games against Peterborough for the final, and it's a tough conversation to have. We replaced Finn Stevens, who's on loan to us from Brentford, with Sam Long, who's a player that I coached at 9 years old and has been on a playing journey through the club as long as I've been on a coaching journey. So the thought in that, we'd always spoken around only making change through two reasons, one being performance is an obvious one, but the second, whether we felt we could take an advantage or prevent an opposition getting an advantage. And with Sam, knowing how strong Bolton were at set plays, they were a team that were second in the league for goals scored from set pieces and top for actually scoring from corners. Very aggressive, very big team. We're a very small team where we fight and we're aggressive in aerial duels, but really we had Elliot Moore, right side, and Kieran Brown, really the only two sizable people at those places. So with Sam's physical abilities as well as his technical that matched Finn's, we felt that would complement us as a team to be able to take that on. And same goalkeeper we've had for the back end of the season since he came in January, replaced James Beadle, who went back in the window, and we brought in Jamie coming from Chelsea. The rest of the team was Joe Bennett as left back, Cameron Brannigan as the holding six. We played with 2 10s with Ruben Rodriguez on the right and Tyler Goodrum on the left, and then the front three led by Mark Harris, and on the right-hand side, Owen Dale, who we signed from Blackpool in January, and Josh Murphy on the left. We'd played Bolton 2 months before in a scoreline that wasn't very flattering to us at all, but formation-wise, they'd remained exactly the same in terms of a 3-5-2. A very sort of narrow back three, where we had Jones on the right, Santos and Toll on the left, Sheehan as the single six, operating with 2 10s, okay, Thomason and Magoma. And then two forwards in Collins and Charles, supported very heavily by Cogley on the right-hand side and Obeta on the left-hand side. We looked at the threats of Bolton, and there was a couple of key things we felt were going to be so important to the game. When I took over in November, the team had been very good at sitting in a deep block and transitioning quickly. When I came in, I wanted to try and change that and to become a bit more aggressive and a bit more of a high-pressing team. It's how I want to coach and how I want our teams to play. From January till March, we'd actually became statistically a team that become the most aggressive pressing team in the league in League One, and as a result, ended up turning over more of the ball and getting more opportunities on goal quicker because of that. Against Bolton, we changed that approach. We felt that the last time we played them, by pressing too high too early with Collins and with Charles, and certainly with the 2 10s that would pull wide, but certainly with Cogley and Obeta, that they could end up pinning you and they'd utilise the space in behind. So we first spoke about a line of engagement, which for us was just around the top of the D here. And then we spoke about how we wanted to engage and what that looked like. They play with the back three, we will press with the front three. We'd done that for a reason of we didn't want to be passive and let them pin us with their two wing backs, obviously with the two forwards as well, and the 10s that would split. What happened in the previous game was our wide players ended up tracking their wing-backs and they allowed them to dictate a lot of the game. So what we spoke about during the lead-up to the game was how to address their back three in terms of the engagement and the trigger. And what we said was we'd press from out to in, so we'd almost let Santos have the ball to an extent. We'd sit in a mid-block because where we were going to engage would prevent a lot of the space behind. So we didn't need to worry too much about longer balls in behind because it would either be dealt with our centre-backs or Jamie coming sweeping from there. But what it allowed us to do was also address our press. So we started with a narrow front three. Mark Harris's job was to screen Sheehan. A lot of Bolton's play, Sheehan's a very good player, but a lot of the play tended to operate and go through Sheehan. So when Santos had the ball, the idea for Mark was to make sure that a direct pass lane wasn't available, to then force him to either Jones on the right-hand side or to Toll on the left. We tried to encourage it to Toll a little bit more, just simply because he was a right-footed centre-back playing on the left of a three. But either way, the principles of what we did didn't really change. And the idea was, when it did come right to Jones, we had Josh Murphy on this side that would look, depending upon the height of the wing-back for here, so Cogley, if he stepped on, his job was to cut the passing line to make sure that that pass couldn't find its way into here. What was important behind was that Mark Harris continued to screen and stop that pass coming into that central area into Sheehan. And then we spoke about the importance on this opposite side of Owen Dale not dropping down and dropping here, because what we wanted to do was make sure that we threatened either this one or this in two different ways. What it did leave was obviously a passing lane. If we closed this one off, it left an opportunity to pass into here, into Mahoma. But because of how we'd set up in behind, rather than being a flat four like we may have been previously in the season, we changed to a three. So Tyler Goodrum's job in this case was to front screen. So not mark behind, but make sure he tried, where possible, to front screen and stop passing lanes central into here. And because we had the extra man in midfield now in Cam Brannigan, we could tuck across and we could also offer cover through here. That allowed us to stop them playing these passes, which would either force them into longer balls or force them into these types of passes where we could steal it and be in good position to then quickly transition against that back three. Or it would force them to go back to the keeper or through the centre-back. And we had a secondary trigger of Mark Harris then being able to release onto Santos. And if and when that happened, Cam Brannigan releasing from the central area, because we had the spare man here, to be able to make sure Sheehan didn't get on the ball. It still gives the security of Ruben Rodriguez taking care of Thomason, and still Tyler Goodrum then taking care of Mahoma. We recognised at times that when we did force it, so we got the other side this time to Toll, if the fullback had started high and they couldn't find them, and that started to happen in the first half, they'd start to drop a little bit deeper. Now, what we didn't want is fullbacks going too high too early, because it would then leave the space for the either run of the 10 to make there or for the opposite 9 to run our centre-back. So what we had to work on was the recognition of, if they drop down and drop deep and it comes here, the first line of the press changes, and the role and responsibility of our wide player in Owen Dale on this side would then be to take responsibility of that, which would allow, if the 10 wanted to run on, which they tended to do, would allow the fullback to stay in his spot. When we did play wide, or we forced them to play wide into either centre-back, the opportunity for Owen Dale in this case, if he did press and it didn't quite go right, and they still managed to find this pass here, because of the runs of either the centre-forward or the 10s, what we found was this still encouraging the wide forwards to get back. But because we had this second line of our press, which could now be a midfield player, if we needed to go out, we could send a midfield player out, allow Cam Brannigan to slide across and deal with one of the 10s, and allow the opposite midfield player, in this case, in Tyler Goodrum, to then slide across and make sure we have security centrally. So it just gives us a couple of different ways of dealing with, if we want to go to a press and we get beat, we have a second line, and then, of course, ultimately the third line becomes about when the fullback takes over and takes that responsibility. So we spoke about the game in three phases. When we have possession, we speak about build-up one, which is generally us playing out from the back, whether it's stationary from the goal kick or whether it's in open play. And what we noticed about Bolton's press, it was a front two press. So anytime the centre-back on this side, Kieran Brown, had it, would be very aggressive here. The other one would lock off the other centre-back. So then it became about the importance of our goalkeeper making that third man to make sure we had a 3v2. We had one here in Cam Brannigan, even though he was under pressure one-on-one, because it allowed their midfield to go man for man here. But the importance of, if we could go in, there was the lack of ability to go out this way because of that. So the importance then of, if we couldn't play forwards, the role of the goalkeeper to support underneath to still give us that 3v2. But the other one to that was, once we did have it, because of the shape of Bolton, obviously 3, but 5, the wing-backs, trying to work out how aggressive both of these were going to be. If we couldn't play through quickly in build-up, what we found was if we could position the full-backs in a space where they could receive, knowing full well that the full-back on this side was going to press and press aggressively, what we'd seen in a lot of the games, both from when we'd played them and since, was that with our wingers and the pace that we have from deeper areas, it left this, which was 3 versus 3. So this was Josh Murphy up against Jones, Santos up against Mark Harris, and obviously Owen Dale on the other side up against Toll. So what we spoke about was the importance of the fullback's position to be able to get the ball and face forwards quickly. And then it was about the position and understanding of what become a relationship with Josh Murphy, or the winger, and the 10. Because what we found was we could go back out and go back through, but what we wanted to do was get it and be effective playing forwards. Whether that was an opportunity to go straight into the 10, because we knew that this one would have to come out and deal with Josh, which would allow us opportunities to go through. Whether it was Joe Bennett getting the ball and looking for the run of the 10 to try and go over, knowing full well that the centre-back would have to come and deal with Murph. Or, on the other case, whether it was the 10 that got locked up and opportunities as they pressed for actually Josh to drop down slightly to get the ball, knowing full well that centre-backs don't want to come too far this way, which would then, with Josh's ability, whether it be to face up or to go in behind, get the opportunity to link and get out quickly. So they were a couple of the opportunities we looked at in build-up 1. The last one, I suppose, was, especially if we couldn't play and they put a real aggressive press and we couldn't play out and out, we knew that with the 3v3 here, if we needed to, we speak about playing through, playing around, and the opportunity to play over. Wembley's a big pitch. We have very good pace, 2 very good attack-minded players here, and a very smart centre forward that was able to try and exploit space. But we've got a goalkeeper with a real good passing range as well. So opportunities to recognise, especially in deeper areas, where we might just be able to go direct and beat for pace 1v1. As we progressed up the pitch, if it wasn't from deep areas, we speak about build-up 2, so almost operating in this midfield area here. And the idea was to either come from here into here to arrive into the final third knowing how we've got there, or come from here into there to know how we've got there. But if we couldn't play around and couldn't play through, what we recognised was 2 different ways that we wanted to try and get at a very good Bolton side. And there's a couple of areas we found where it came through the centre-backs directly if they had time on the ball as we shifted. What we found was if we could, depend upon the position of the nearest 10 that was marking our 10, if we could find, whether it was in from the centre-back or from the full-back in this case, in here, with Sheehan being a single 6 at times, there was an ability for our opposite 10 to run off the back. So there was a couple of times, certainly during the game, that when we got it, as we turned and we got our 10s into these spaces from the first phase, if we couldn't find the winger, what we found was a Bolton backline that had to drop. Sheehan that also had to try and recover. But what we found was with Mark Harris running the centre-back, there was always an opportunity for us to come out the other side and really try and exploit that space. If we couldn't go direct, and Ruben Rodriguez, I think in the first 20 minutes, got a really good opportunity, unfortunately his left foot, to try and exploit that, which didn't come off. What we'd also spotted was an opportunity that wherever Mark Harris tended to go, Bolton were very aggressive in how they want to mark. And what we found was wherever the centre forward went, Santos would follow to be aggressive. So if it did come in, and this does happen a lot, and it happened a lot in the game, whether it come from the centre-back, the 6, or the full-backs, if it went to the full-back and our 10 pulled off and our winger stayed wide, what would happen is be opportunities to play into our 9. What tends to happen, Santos big, aggressive, and very good at what he does, and physically can muscle you off the ball. So rather than actually try and get into a battle with him, what we spoke about a lot leading into the week was, can we use the smartness of Mark Harris to try and drag him out of those spaces, knowing full well that because, again, when they come into a full press, if we can get him out of these spaces, whether we can go direct, whether it be from the centre-backs, the 6, into that space for the run of our opposite 10, or if it's a little bit deeper, if the 10's too deep, the opportunity for our winger, in this case Josh Murphy, or on the right-hand side Owen Dale, opportunities to come in and through here for the run of the winger, who we know has pace to get inside and exploit, actually drag in the central defender out of that space to exploit that space. And that's something that we worked on quite a lot during the week. So looking at how we wanted to press, we spoke around the line of engagement, where we wanted to press to try and negate the strengths of both the wing-backs of Bolton and, of course, the 2 centre-forwards and the 10s that want to pull you wide. I'd like to think we addressed that problem. But then it was about how do we actually, we've got a way we want to play with the ball, but with the players that we have leading into this game, what we had worked on is becoming a more aggressive team rather than sitting deep and pressing. Can we come from that mid-block and be more aggressive in transition and try and get opportunities and goal quicker because of that? That engagement line was so important during this game because what we didn't want to do is press too high too early, because if we did that, regardless of whether we got it right or wrong, if we were to win the ball, we actually wanted the space behind Bolton's 3 as well as in front. And the idea with that was, if we can encourage them to our engagement line to the edge of the D here, it would allow us that when we did win it, so if it was Santos that played wide and we could get Josh Murphy pressing and stealing here, because we spoke about the aggressiveness of Owen Down not dropping down, Mark Harris was then, if we were to win the ball, was available to be played. We had the opposite winger able to come in and the 10 able to break. So there was real opportunities that when we won it, to actually exploit the space in front if we couldn't get behind, but also we wanted this space here to be able to really get at them in there. We spoke about, again, if it comes to this side and it's Josh Murphy that presses, because now we have the security of the midfield who have to be brave. We don't want them marking behind because it allows an opportunity to bounce in and come out, which causes this problem. So what we asked of them was, even if we get a press, can you mark in front and front screen? Because if you can do that and they want to try and force that through and we steal it, we still have 1 against 1 here. We have 1 against 1 here, 1 against 1 here, and the other 10 trying to get there as well. So it's the importance of the position of the player to try and front mark or front screen that would stop the ball being able to come in to go out, but also really set us up in a way that when we won it, and with Tyler and Ruben, who are very attack-minded players in this formation, with a very attack-minded 6 sitting in behind them, in Cam Brannigan with an excellent passing range, really allowed us to, when we won the ball, not only break early and break quickly, but exploit space here, either side of what we felt was the 6, but also getting behind a back line that was high, but a 3 versus 3, or in times 4 versus 3 in our favour. The first goal, just after the half-hour mark, it was a well-worked goal, come from a throw-in, so Joe Bennett's got the ball. And there comes a biting point. We spoke about Mark Harris being the player that could become free. There's going to be a point where he comes and the centre-back doesn't want to come too far and too much across to leave too much space. But what we found was from the throw-in, Mark Harris frees himself. Bennett plays into Mark Harris. It's an opportunity then for him to flick it round the corner on the opposite 10 to Tyler Goodrum. And with the cover of Sheehan, again, Mark makes the run again, which opens up the space and the opportunity to play back to Ruben Rodriguez, our opposite 10, either side. And then because, again, we ask the importance of our wide players and how we play, to stay wide and keep the pitch as big as possible. The passing range and the ability of both Tyler and of Ruben, the first thought is to always find our wingers. If it's not the 9, it's definitely the wingers to try and exploit that space. And it was a wonderful first-time pass in from Ruben, where Josh Murphy's got himself on the ball, and even though there was a recovering fullback in Cogley, the Bolton midfield 3 still defended and dropped it extremely well. Sheehan, of course, made an effort to get back, as did everybody else, but Josh, 1v1, opportunity to then run inside, and again, because the 2 10s make the runs that they do, it opens up the space for Josh to continue coming in. And he hits a wonderful ball across the goal, takes a small deflection off of Santos and loops up and in over the goalkeeper to make it 1-0. Second goal, it comes from a goal kick, so we've chosen not to play out, and Jamie Cumming has decided to kick long. Ball's gone long, it's a good battle, but the beauty of this is because we've got almost a matched up midfield, we're able to at least compete. We're not the biggest of teams, but we've got some brave players that will put themselves as best they can about to compete, and that was so important in the first phase of this because it loops up once, and there's a second phase that we have to compete for. During the first phase, the ball does drop, and what you see is Mark Harris has started to already drift down the pitch, and he's attracted the attention of Santos, who comes with him. And Josh Murphy goes to make a run because he thinks the pass is going to come. On the first phase, when it happens, it doesn't. And on the second phase, it does loop back up in the air again. And Josh has already made a recovery run back in, but Santos has stayed where he is with Mark Harris. And as it has dropped, Ruben Rodriguez has had a wonderful touch, but what he's also recognised is the opportunity not to find the run, but to find the space and the run. And it's a beautiful pass that he makes that plays into the space where has been vacated here. And again, the central back can't release too quickly too early because he's got Owen Dale to worry about here. But Josh recognises the opportunity and the timing of both the pass to make the run into that space. The pass from Ruben encourages the keeper to come. It doesn't quite get there, and Josh's first touch is fantastic. Takes it past the outrun of the keeper, takes it a little bit wide, but is finished from a very narrow angle. Puts the ball in to make it 2-0 and allow us to go into half-time with a very well-deserved 2-0 lead. We spoke to the players about maybe dealing with a bit more directness. but not changing what we did, because if we were to continue setting up our position the way we had, there wasn't the space for them to exploit going in behind. So as long as, even if it was, whether it was Santos or even if we still wanted to put pressure here, because we didn't want to be a team that started to drop and then encourage opportunities on our goal. But what we did say was the importance then of, if it was on the other side, if we go to the other side, if we was to say toe and we're still asking players to be brave and encourage pressing here, the real importance become then around the importance of the 210s. Because we'd been asking them to front screen, what started to happen is when they got bypassed, and again it became 2 versus 2 here, Kieran Brown on the left and Elliot Moore were immense aerially. But what was so important was, regardless of whether they won it or there was a flick on, because we were asking our 210s in this phase to be a little bit more aggressive as well as our wide players, if that was to happen, the importance of these two getting back either side to make sure that if that did drop into an advantageous area, that it didn't then become a 2 versus 1 or a 3 versus 1 in this space. But the message very, very much was, until they make a change tactically, we will continue to do what we want to do. So we were 2-0 up, and Cam Brannigan, who had been having an excellent couple of months with us, and he's a very important player to what we do and how we do it. Fortunately, been struggling with an ankle, and he picked up a knock in the first half, which he'd been trying to manage. But then there was a tackle made in the second half where he felt it, and it ended up going out for a corner. He wasn't able to continue, so we had a choice to make on who do we replace Cam with, and we've got 2 very good players in Marcus McGuane and Josh McEachran, both of which had shared that role as a single 6, because the other temptation was always to try and go to 2 6s to try and negate those type of longer balls or try and shut the game up. My issue with that was, with it being around 60 minutes, there was still at least 30 of normal time and what ended up being 9 minutes of added time. If we went to 2 6s, I felt that we would concede a lot more possession, a lot more ground. So the change we chose to make was actually Marcus McGuane, and I think a lot of people would have expected Josh McEachran to come in there to calm it down and manage it. But Marcus had worked extremely hard to get himself back into the team. And we just felt with the way the game was playing, the ability for Marcus to really get around the pitch, knowing full well that we were going to bring Josh on a little bit later and move Marcus higher, they would allow us to keep our energy in this space, whilst also make sure that when we won the ball, we could start that attacking intent and pace that we wanted. For us to finish the game against a Bolton side that finished 10 points above us in the league, we're a team that were there for automatic promotions and possessed so many threats across the pitch. We come away from the game not just with the scoreline and a plan that had almost gone to perfection, if you will, as much as it possibly can, but we restricted such an attacking side with so many good attacking players to 0 shots on target on our goal. And that was down to players being very clear on what they did, executing it as well as they could, and sticking together throughout the whole 900 minutes that Wembley gave us to provide everyone associated with our football club one of the best days possible, and to put us back into the Championship after 25 years of actually being out of it. So it's a fantastic achievement for the playing group, for the club, and it was a wonderful experience to experience as a local boy, as an Oxford boy, from the sideline to now lead them to that level of competition.